So I've already started pulling the dash a little bit. What we are trying to do is get that apart so that we can put the air conditioning in and swap wiring harnesses, as well as pull any necessary accessories that we're going to need to get out in order to do a better job at prepping the engine bay. So that includes things like getting the brake booster out, the throttle cable, the slave cylinder, anything that goes through the firewall essentially that goes into the cab. So pulling the dash is going to make this job a lot easier. And then since we have all the nuts and bolts, we'll just put everything back exactly where it was. And here we have the engine bay left from when we pulled the 1.5 out. A little grungy, so we're going to remove the wiring harness, which is part of why we got to pull the dash, because that goes through right there. We'll pull things that are unnecessary out, like this charcoal canister, which takes a vent line from the gas tank and goes into here, and then through I don't know, an EGR solenoid or something, it goes back into the engine. But we're just going to get rid of that because we don't need it. Got some nice shiny parts on the table ready for install. The fresh 4G63 right here. Some other odds and ends on the ground, pieces and parts. I went ahead and started removing the dash, only to realize I wasn't filming anything. So I'll explain the parts that I took off, how to get them off, and what tools you need. So this gauge bezel is pretty delicate. So this is one of the first things we took off. There's 4 screws that hold that in. 2 that you can see that I put back, and then 2 up top. These ones had a flat top to them. And then when you loosen that up, typically there's at least 2 connectors, one for the defog and one for the hazard switch. And they're a little tough to get out, so just take your time. You don't want to break this. Next we have this little privacy cubby. If you just open the cover up and go ahead and pull it straight out, it should just slide right out. No tools needed. This little kick panel cover over by the fuse box, also no tools needed, but you'll notice that there's a little slot that you actually have to pull this in the opposite direction of that slot so that the piece will slide right out. No tools needed. Also these side vents, there's one on the driver's side and one on the passenger side. In order to get the dashboard out, there's a 10mm bolt behind this. You shouldn't need any tools to pry this out if you just gently put your fingers in and pull it out. Otherwise you can use a flat blade or some plastic pry bars and just be very gentle pulling this out. As you can see, there's just a couple of a little divot here. Clock is in the center, also has a 10mm bolt behind it, but again you may just need to use a couple of screwdrivers gently to remove this on either side. And then there's one plug in the back, otherwise you'll have a blank off plate. Same technique. To the left of our steering wheel, where the privacy cover was, there will be a 10mm bolt that is in that left corner there. And then there is a Phillips head screwdriver on the bottom right portion. And then there's a couple of plastic tabs on the top. And then you're going to have a couple of butt connectors that you have to unplug and for your dimmer switch. This is another one of the kick panels right below the radio, kind of by your feet. There should be 2 of these, I've only got one. This just pulls off, no tools. Same with the speaker covers, no tools, just start from the top and pull down. You'll see there's 2 tabs in the bottom. Second one over here. Old school ashtray, Go ahead and just pull that straight out. This radio bezel has 2 screws at the top and 2 screws at the bottom, right on either side of the ashtray. And then you can have your cigarette lighter outlet, which has a positive and a negative. And then it's also got a light that you have to twist out with a light bulb. And then other than that, it should just pop out. Careful, there's a couple of plastic clips on it. This one gets a little tricky. There is a 10mm bolt behind that plate that mounts to the dash. And then you have to also got to remove the cable that goes to the hood from the hood latch. I just put it back so that I knew where the bolts and nuts were. Over here there's a little vent for the crotch cooler. I put the little plastic clip back in, and then there's a couple of holes, one there and one there. There were some Phillips head screws that were like M6 by 1.25 thread, and you got a 10mm bolt on that corner. And I think that was it. Well, there's also a 10mm bolt on the top right. Now, the next thing we did was we removed the tachometer, or not the tachometer, but the gauges. Next thing we did is we removed the gauges, and there were 3 Phillips head screws, one at the clock and one at the top, one on the right, and one on the left. And this just pulled straight towards you. So you can see there's a couple of sockets on the back with a bunch of pins for your check engine lights, a couple for other warning lights, oil lights, and then you've got a little rotating speedometer cable. It just pops right out. It's the back side. So in order to get the dash out, the steering column has to drop out. So we want to take out the Phillips screws. There's 1, 2, and 3. There's 3 screws that hold that in. There's the 3rd one back there. Take that off. Then there's some 12mm bolts and nuts that hold the steering column to the dash bar. And you want to drop that down low so that we can swing up the dash and go out the passenger door. These are the connectors that you want to pull out to remove the dash. There's 2 yellow ones, 2 white ones, and this small black one. Removing the glove box gives you access to 2 10mm bolts that hold in the dash. It also allows you to remove the linkage for the air conditioning. There's 3 10mm bolts that gotta come out. 1, 2, and 3. There's also 2 screws, Phillips heads, that have to come out of the bottom. And then there's additional Phillips screws at the top behind the dash, or behind the glove box, that need to come out. There's also one more that was hidden in the corner here. You have to get this other kick panel out to get to that. 10mm bolt. And there were 1, 2, 3, 4 screws on the top. 2 more 10mm bolts deep down in here and in there. That should be it. All we gotta do now is drop the steering. This whole dash is moving. So after we got the dash out, we took the blower motor, the spacer for the air conditioning, and the heater core out of the front of the car, folded back the carpet, and moved up the firewall insulation. Actually have it mounted up by making a small hole with a razor blade to penetrate one of the little studs that sticks out, and that helps keep it out of the way. I had to make a couple cuts. On the firewall blanket, right above and below the heater core, and then another small one down by where the wire harness runs. So we're going to try to put the ECU in the factory location and swap out this wiring harness for the Turbo Colt harness.